Any topics of discussion during a broadcasted show is in no way the exclusive view nor opinion of the host or any Webb Radio Network staff. You're listening to the Fox Paranormal Chat.
Jessica, it seems to be okay.
And now, Michael and Destiny Fox.
Good evening.
Hello, spooky people.
We're going to explore the strange and the macabre
Well,
tonight.
first we're going to introduce everybody. Got Kobe with us. How you doing, Kobe? Kobe. Hello. Kobe.
Kobe has gone to another dimension.
Let me send him a message and tell him to unmute his...
And of course, we have Jessica.
Hi.
We have an interesting topic tonight that actually Destiny brought this to my attention. And it's really, I think it's caught the interest of all of us here that's been listening to these things. We're going to be exploring some wild and strange things tonight.
Like Kobe just sitting there and then disappearing in thin air.
Yes.
How have you been doing?
He's learned a
Jessica?
magic trick.
I know. It was
Dude.
like scared me.
Poof.
Hello, Charles.
Good evening, Charles. Welcome to the Spooky Show. At nighttime, I like listening to Christina Randall. She talks about murder and all kinds of stories of murder and mystery and stuff. And I'm just so addicted to her. And so I listen to these murder stories before I go to bed, and I sleep like a rock.
Is that the lady that does the podcast while she's doing her makeup?
No. I'll send you a link to one of her videos and let you see her. I do know she watched. I sent her a message and invited her to be a guest on our show, and she said she'd definitely try to find time for it. I'm like her biggest fan, and she knows this.
Yeah.
And she's even watched the TV show we were on, and so I'm like, yes. She tells the story about when she was actually in prison. Just, nothing real serious, just hard-headed young woman, and you'll just have to listen to her videos. I absolutely love Christina Randall. And Charles said he's ready to be spooked. Well, maybe we can do a good job of that tonight and try to spook everybody. So talking about Christina Randall, so as I'm scrolling through different videos to watch, and she always pops up, and several others do, I saw a new type of video last night. And on this video, it was talking about a little boy. He was 12 years old. And there's Kobe.
I made it back.
Well, good.
Kobe, we did the show 3 days ago.
Where have you been? We've looked all over the property for you. What's that? You just have to know what our show's about to know why we said that. This little boy went to play with his bow and arrow in the woods. And while he was playing in the woods with a bow and arrow, he got tired of it. So over at a little creek, he decides that he's going to build a little dam around it and try to catch some fish up in there. And so he's doing that. And down a long path comes walking this man. This man looked like a normal person, just like you and I guess we look normal. So the man's dressed nice. He's in a suit. Okay, keep in mind they are in the woods. They're out in the woods, and here comes this man down a path, and suit just, looks clean cut. And so the man says, "How are you?" And he says, I'm doing good." And so he says, um, "You want to go with me over to my house for a little bit? I just live right over there in the cabin." So the little boy's like, "Well, sure, I'll go." So he walks on, and they travel a little bit. And as the little boy and this man are traveling, the little boy realizes he's been in those woods so many times. He doesn't remember a cabin being in that area in the woods. And he's actually being led to a place he's never seen before. Everything looks strange to him. So he walks on, and he gets to the house. He sees one of the family friends, a man sitting on the front porch talking to some people. He hears some children laughing and playing in the house. And the family friend sitting on the front porch talking to other people waves at him, and he waves back. And he goes in. The man feeds him dinner, and after he eats, he falls asleep. So after he falls asleep, he wakes up, and it's early, early in the morning. And so he's like, "I really didn't mean to fall asleep, And I imagine he's thinking, my parents are going to be worried to death. So he asked the man, he said, "Will you please take me home?" And the man said, "Sure. Come on." He said, "I'll lead you halfway up the path, and then you'll be able to find your way from there." Well, the man's walking him up the path, and they travel along, and the little boy sees on one side lots of pretty trees, on the other side rows of corn, and he keeps walking. Then all of a sudden they get to a crossroads, and the man stops, and he said, "Well, this is as far as I can go, but you go ahead, and when you get down here, you go to the right, and then you get to another little spot, and you turn to the right again, and you'll know exactly where you are." So the little boy's traveling out of the woods, and he sees coming down through the trees his dad and some more people, and the friend that he had seen on the front porch, and he's waving at him, "Here I am, here I am." And they go running up to him, and they're like, "Where have you been?" And he starts to tell the story, and they're like, "Don't you realize you've been gone 3 days? 3 days." And he said, "No, there was a cabin. It's right over in this direction. I can take you to it." And he looks at the family friend, and he says, "You were there. You ate dinner with us." And he said, "I wasn't there. I've been here with your folks trying to find you for 3 days. We've been searching. There's search parties everywhere." And the little boy sticks to his story, and he's telling them all about it. And they got just a little bit spooked, because the father told the little boy, he said, "Well, the whole time you were missing, we heard the drum rhythm come,
Rhythmic drums coming
yeah,
out of the woods,
right in the direction that he said he was in." And as soon as he found them, um, he said the drum stopped.
which is interesting. Now, he lost 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
but to the little boy, he was only there overnight. And this isn't the only story.
Oh no,
this
there's more.
nature.
But what do you
There's a
think
lot.
about this? Let's just say the story is true. I've actually read this story before by a whole different person. So, it is a pretty well-known story about this 12-year-old boy.
There's a lot of question, Destiny,
So it makes you wonder.
as to the time lapse, the loss of time. Is it because, like me and Michael were talking at dinner, is it because of an open portal? Is there something there that's drawing these people? Is it because they're vulnerable to it?
Well, I don't know. But to think that this cabin wasn't there actually at all. Neither was
So it makes
the
you
Rose
wonder
of
if they're
Porn.
stepped into a. Makes you wonder if
It
they've
makes
stepped
me
into a different
wonder.
dimension.
Exactly.
Well, that's the point we're getting at here. Maybe it was a different dimension. We've heard of other people reporting time loss like this. A lot of times it goes with stories of being abducted by aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they always come back and say, they've been gone 2 weeks, but it's only been 1 day.
Right. And Charles brings up the movie Fire in the Sky. Well, a little bit different than that because, he actually, according to the story, he was not abducted by aliens.
No.
So he's just ran into this man, went back to his cabin, had dinner. He ate dinner there.
Mm-hmm.
And then woke up the next morning after he fell asleep and just wanted to go home. No harm came to him, but he was gone 3 days.
Yes.
There's other stories out there on the internet very similar to this one. But what about the drums? What do you think, Michael?
Well, like Kobe and I was talking earlier when we were all discussing this story, I had one theory that maybe it wasn't drums at all. Maybe it was the sound from a portal door that's been left open, or a tear in the space-time continuum.
Yeah, and the walls warping in and out, making a drumming sound.
Einstein, always had the theory that, we weren't alone. We were just one strand on timeline, and there was thousands and thousands of other timelines that was running alongside us.
Right. And then you tell the story about a friend of yours that wrote that book about the family that he walked in on the kitchen.
Yeah. Now that was a true story. And I believe the guy, he was a paranormal investigator, and how his situation started. He was investigating an old abandoned house. Well, he was doing something we normally don't do. He was investigating alone.
Mm-hmm.
He walked through the house, and things were going fairly smooth. And he walked into the kitchen. At the exact time he walked into the kitchen, he looked, and there was an elderly couple sitting at a table eating breakfast. He looked at them. They looked at him. They acknowledged they seen him. And he described, they screamed. He said it startled him. He ran out of the room, but when he ran back in, it was abandoned again. It was just old, dilapidated kitchen.
That's interesting. And Jerry's like, are y'all smoking? Aliens do not exist. Coming from a man that did a podcast about aliens. I listened to it too.
Have you guys seen the show called the 4400, where these people, there's like 4400 people, and they just like disappear, and they're all like presumed dead or still missing persons, and then one day they all show up, and it's been like a decade, and they all show up and they've not aged a day, and everybody's trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, I introduced Dylan to a show called Manifest, and it's a lot to do with conspiracy theories, and he loves stuff like that.
And that show was based similar to these stories. The people on that series experienced time loss. They didn't age, but when they came back, the rest of the world had aged years ahead of them.
Right. But it was just a movie, though.
Yeah, it was just a movie. But I mean, the situation in the theories are still there.
Right.
Yeah, the one lady was a teenager when she disappeared, and when she came back, her twin sister is like in her 20s, and this girl, the twin sister's like 25, and the girl's like 15.
Mm-hmm.
They were twins, and so she's looking at herself younger, the 25-year-old. It's like looking at old family photos, but it's your sister and she's alive and she's been missing for it would have to be a weird situation if you were actually be in it.
Right.
Yeah, it would be. Now, Jeremy had a good point. He was investigating alone, so there was no witnesses.
Right.
That's why, we always stress you need at least one other person with you to validate whatever you find or what's happening to you. There's another person giving the same story.
Right.
Well, that and for safety's sake.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There's another story that we found this afternoon, and I had heard this story before. A man took his children to a lake to go swimming. He had his 2 sons there and his daughter. Well, they get in immediately. They're swimming around, they're playing, having a good time. The man takes his eyes off of his daughter. I believe her name was Catherine. He took his eyes off of her just for a few minutes and was watching his boys and looked back, and his daughter Catherine, who was 16 years old, was 8 years old maybe.
She was 8 years old.
And she had disappeared, just totally disappeared. So they began looking for Catherine. They searched everywhere for her. The search went on into woods. 3 days went by. They were still looking for her. Well, one day someone found her and she was in a cave. She was 7 miles from where she had came up missing. And she had been gone 3 days, but she remembered sleeping overnight 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
But she had been gone several days. And she could not remember. She said the first thing she remembers, she's walking off, and the next thing she remembers, she's waking up in the cave. So she's got that time loss. She doesn't know what happened.
Well, the investigators, the people that was looking for her, found it amazing that she was found 7 miles from where she disappeared.
And had been walking barefoot in her bathing suit.
In a bathing suit, and only had a couple of scratches on her.
Yeah, scratch on her face.
And
they
said this
arm.
was very dense, thick, wooded areas.
So what in the world, happened to her in this amount of time that she was missing? Michael and I have had one episode where we actually lost time.
Mm-hmm.
We were coming from LaGrange, Georgia, back to Temple, and it's our 10-minute drive. We leave our destination in LaGrange, and what seemed like 10 minutes later, we were coming into Carrollton, which is exactly 1 hour from LaGrange. And I was like, how did we get here so fast? He said, I don't know. And it's like, we don't remember the drive from there to there, and only 10 minutes has passed. There is no way we drove from LaGrange to Carrollton in 10 or 15 minutes. So we've never been able to explain that. That's a mystery to this day.
Yeah. I mean, we did experience that. Now, we've never been able to totally explain that either. But with these children, and a lot of these stories that have put out there, is they're talking about children having these missing days, that they're gone and then they just pop back up. And the children are saying, well, it was just a couple hours ago. And they're saying, no, you've been gone 3 days.
Yeah, that was the fastest trip we ever took from LaGrange to Carrollton, too. Jeremy says science has proven that there are, in fact, 9 different dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's a project called CRIN. It is proven that we can tap into different dimensions. Now, what is fascinating about CRIN is it's located on the same mountain where the Watcher ascended to the earth from the heavens. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Don't get me on them Watchers.
Well, maybe we should have Jeremy come on, and he seems to have some information on this subject.
Well, I don't know. We've had a hard time talking here the last 2 or 3 days. I needed to talk to him. He called me back today, but I was at the dentist and I couldn't answer the phone. Yeah. So this $1 million smile, that's what it's costing me in the long run. But
it looks great.
I love it. I feel better about smiling. Jeremy says he knows nothing about it. It's just good, I can smile and not be ashamed to smile. But lots of dollars on this dentist stuff. Fortunately, I've had a special friend of mine that has been helping me along with this, and I'm so blessed and honored for that. So,
Well, science, like Jeremy said, they have proven the dimensional thing. So Jeremy is correct on that. And this has been discussed for years and years in science, that we're not alone, not necessarily aliens alone. There's parallel dimensions going alongside us.
well, now I did have something strange. I don't know if it has anything to do with that or not happened today. Um, I hadn't been awake long, and I'm sitting on the side of the bed, throwing up my shields on Monopoly. That's the first thing I do every morning. And so I've got my little phone in my hand, and I'm doing that. And I hear a train. Jessica, you've been to my house. There's no train close
Train
to my
tracks
house.
anywhere around.
No,
I
no,
heard
there's not.
I heard the train whistle, and I even heard it hitting the tracks. The wheels on the tracks, the noise that it
The
makes.
clank, yeah.
I heard that. And then I told Michael about it when he called at lunch. And I said, "You're not going to believe what I heard this morning."
Yeah.
And he said, "That is so weird because 2 weeks ago, the same thing happened to me."
Yeah, I heard a train. It sounded like it was in the distance, but we're nowhere close. We're miles from the
No,
closest railroad track here.
You know what it makes me wonder is if there was a railroad track through there at some point. Like, what if the road that goes in front of your house used to be a railway? Because they used to run all over the place and they've been decommissioned and turned into other things, sometimes roads, sometimes
Yeah.
walking tracks, all kinds of stuff.
right.
Yeah.
And Temple's not that far from where we live. Um, Temple was founded because they actually built the railroad through there, and they built a little stop right there with a little restaurant, and people started settling there, and that's how Temple came into existence, was because of the train. They had a little, what do you call it, the depot.
Yes.
Train depot.
Train depot.
When they built the train depot, and when the train would have to stop, and people on board the train would need food, or the engineers would need to stop for something, they would stop there. And so that's how Temple was founded.
Look, all the time we spent on your front porch last summer, if we'd have been able to hear that train from Temple, we'd have heard that train from Temple at some point.
Girl, we
Yeah.
lived on my
So-
front porch last summer.
Yeah.
Us and about 20 other people all summer long. We had people over. It was so much fun every weekend.
Until
But,
it started raining, and then we were all crowded
I
up
know.
under there like sardines.
My thinking is, if there is other dimensions like we were talking about, if they do exist, and occasionally something opens up and you're either able to go to that dimension briefly, or someone from that dimension's able to come here briefly, how much of that can we tie into the paranormal as far as people seeing ghosts?
Well, a lot, maybe it's not ghosts that we see. Maybe
Yes.
it's people from another dimension. I mean, I'm open to other possibilities.
And of course, good and evil can exist either, in our dimension or that dimension. So does demonic entities, maybe they have the ability to travel back and forth from these dimensions and leave a door open sometimes.
No, they're here on this earth, roaming to and fro. They're already here. But another story that we found fascinating was a set of grandparents had their granddaughter, who was 6 years old, on a walking trail. And walking along, they saw, well, I think they were headed home. Walking along, they saw a waterfall off in the distance, and the little girl wanted to go to the waterfall. So this is totally not about any loss of time, but I thought the story was fascinating when I heard it. When they looked to see if they could get her down to the waterfall, It looked like they would have to climb a tree and go over a little cliff-like thing to get to the waterfall to actually be there at it and not view it from the distance. Well, they told their granddaughter, no, you can't do that. We just can't do it. It's not going to happen. The little girl stomped her feet. She cried. She sat down on the ground. And the grandparents said, well, we just can't go down there. It's not safe. And we're just not taking you down there. And so they thought they'd play a little strategy with her.
Mm-hmm.
And they walked off from her. As they were walking off from her, they would look back to see, if she had actually started following. Charles says we lost feed. To see if she was following them. And they looked back, and sure enough, she was back there behind them. She was looking down at the ground. She was pouting, of course. Well, she's walking along, and they're walking along, and they would keep looking back to make sure she was behind them. Well, this went on for some time. Once they looked back, and she was not there. She was gone. So frantically, they started looking for her for about 40 minutes or an hour. They're looking for her. They can't find her anywhere. So naturally, a search party is formed, and they start looking for her. They can't find her anywhere. So was it the next day?
It was the next day.
The next day, they find her sitting like on a tree stump or something with her legs dangling off toward the water, her feet in the water. And so they rush to her. Oh, you're okay. You're okay. And she says, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. And so in questioning her, they begin to ask her, where were you? And she said, I was on the cliff. So there was a little overlook, like a little cliff there in the woods. And they had went there in the beginning of their trip. And she said she slept there the night before. And they're like, well, if you had been there, the helicopters would have seen you. Somebody would have seen you. She said, oh, well, I met an imaginary friend. And she said, my new imaginary friend is, I can't remember, Larissa or something like that. And she just kept talking about her. They took her to the hospital to get examined. She was just fine. And as they began to question her there, she stuck to her story. And she said that the imaginary friend had saved her life by leading her down the cliff, walking ahead of her so she would not fall, guiding her through the dangerous parts, and making sure that she stayed safe all night. So the media got a hold of this, the little story that the little girl was talking about, and people started researching.
Yeah.
And about 20 years prior, a little girl, 4 years old, had died on the cliff. And her name was Lavonda.
The names were real similar
to her imaginary friend that she talked about. So what happened to her? No time loss. Just a little spooky story that we found. She actually she said her little friend was 4 years old. And that's the age Lavonda was when she died there. So this little girl, she described her dark hair, brown eyes.
Yeah.
As an adult, this woman, now 20-something years old, did a podcast not long ago. And she actually talked about, I had never had an imaginary friend before, and I've never had one since.
Mm-hmm.
But she said that little girl kept her safe until she could be found. She was 6 years old.
6 years old.
6 years old.
Yeah. Again, it was interesting. And of course, the way the story goes, she spent the night in the woods.
She spent the night on that cliff.
On that cliff.
Open. I mean, by the way they described the story, it could have been seen with a helicopter flying over. She could have been seen had she been sleeping on that cliff.
Well, they said the helicopter did have thermal cams available. So they could have seen a heat signature at night
Yeah.
when they were scanning looking for this child.
So she was on the cliff in a different dimension again. Like the
Again,
spirit led her into like the spirit realm almost. And she stayed the night there.
You could have.
so, are we talking dimensional travel?
Astral
Potentially.
Yeah.
Something
See, this
similar.
is one of those things that we don't have much research on. So
No.
it's not really easy to say, oh, well, it's this or this, it's that, because we have no clue. Everything we're saying tonight is basically assumptions or opinions on what it might be. But
Right.
we'll never, in our lifetimes, we may never really know what it is.
We won't. That's what makes
We're-
life so interesting.
We're bringing these stories to the public. I mean, everybody can make their own assumption on what they think's
Right.
going on here.
Right. Because we don't know. I mean, we're just talking about something
Yeah.
we know nothing about.
It's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
See, that's the fun part of the paranormal is we get to guess or opinionate on what it might be, but really we sit and we theorize about things, and it's just fun to theorize.
It really
It could
is.
be this or it could be that.
I would love to hear some firsthand stories if we have anybody, listening tonight that's maybe had something similar to this happen to them.
Well, we do have a client, and I hope she don't mind me telling this. I'm sure she won't. I won't give her name. But a client that we worked with was in her car at a park sort of situation and just sitting in her car. At some point, she gets out of her car and she takes a walk. Okay, she lost time because the next thing she remembers, she's off in a ditch. She is off in a ditch, a hole in the woods. She doesn't know how she got there.
Right.
She began yelling out and screaming out for help because she couldn't get out of the hole she was in. She climbed, she tried that, everything she could. So the only thing she knew to do was start screaming out for help. And she did. Finally, a man heard her screaming and he came and helped her get out. And this is also the one that I saw the face of how people describe aliens to look like in one of her pictures. The face reflecting out of the glass. It was creepy. It was creepy. So, we've come to the conclusion that she is being haunted by maybe aliens. I don't know. It's never happened again, and it had never happened before.
Again, it was an interesting story, to sit there and have her tell us, her story. And of course, we don't judge people. We take it for what it is. They're telling us. She's asking us to help her and investigate this. So we try to investigate the best we can. But some situations
are out of our hands.
Yeah, are out of our hands.
When I lived in North Carolina, I used to work as a package delivery driver a long time ago. My son, who's a grown man now, was a infant child at the time. I mean, not even 2 years old, little toddler. I had a babysitter that used to babysit for me almost all the time, but if she had a doctor's appointment, a friend of mine that lived in Snow Camp, North Carolina, would babysit him for me while I worked. And one morning I was driving out to Snow Camp, which was typically about a 35-minute drive where they lived from my house. And I got up and did my regular routine. I left the house at the normal time. But when I arrived at her house, I was 15 minutes earlier than usual, and she wasn't even out of bed yet because it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. Somewhere along that road, I lost time, but I gained time, and I can't exactly explain what happened. And it happened to me multiple times on that road after that, the same thing. Yeah. And on a normal day driving out there, I knew that it would take me 30 to 35 minutes to get out there. But sometimes I'd get there and I'd be 10 minutes earlier, and I knew I hadn't been speeding. There's no way on those curvy roads you could go fast enough to knock off 15 minutes. There's no way. So how did that happen? And I still, to this day, question, how did that happen? That was out there. They lived really near out there where the devil's stomping grounds are, Michael.
Yeah, I've been there.
And just like our trip from LaGrange to Carrollton, the hour drive, I kid you not, 10 or 15 minutes, we were already in Carrollton. What kind of time warp situation did we get into? Because I have no explanation for that. None at all. And not only did it happen once, it happened, what, about twice?
Yeah, I think it happened twice.
It happened twice.
Yeah. But, Jessica was mentioning North Carolina, which, brings in mind the lost colony on Roanoke Island. The whole colony disappeared. And that's never been explained.
Yeah, that was one thing that you were talking about earlier when we were looking for stories for the show. Hey, Lady B. We met this Lady B Brown in Alabama at the Deep South Paracon last year. And it was like, she was one of those people you just connect with, kind of soul sister kind of thing. You kind of feel like connected to somebody's soul. It was like, I watch her on Facebook all the time. Her little videos, she goes places.
We had a lot of nice people at the Paracon in Alabama last year.
Yes.
I mean, we made some good connections, and I am just so looking forward to this year.
Yeah, there's something special about Lady B.
Yeah.
I know there is. There's a lot to her.
Lady B, yes.
Yeah, I know there's a lot to her.
Yeah, I met her too when we were there.
Yeah, she's a mystery.
Yes.
Lady of mystery.
Yes. And, we do want some feedback on this subject, from the audience. If you have something you want to share with everyone.
This is something Charles put up. It just now came up on the screen. In 1974, my best friend had an accident, and there were several people looking for him, and he couldn't be found. The next morning, his body was found where law enforcement, his dad, and himself and several others had walked right by his car, and he was there in the ditch next to the car. Was he alive?
It doesn't sound like it. He said body.
Oh. Okay.
I'm sorry for your loss, Charles.
So very sorry.
I think the point is they looked in that area and it wasn't there the night before, but then all of a sudden it's there.
No, that is strange.
Yeah.
That really is.
So
and the law enforcement, they don't usually miss a spot. You know what I mean?
No.
They're pretty thorough.
Yeah, they're pretty thorough, which they have to be. I mean,
yeah,
they're trained to do that. Yeah. They have to be thorough, and especially when, someone's missing, they don't want to leave any stone unturned.
So it makes you wonder, how did he just appear back? Because that means that he wasn't there, and then he was.
Interesting.
I've heard a lot of stories over the years, though, it's, talked about people being in situations where it was fairly dangerous, and they would hear somebody call for them, and they would follow the voice, and it would get them out of that situation by following the voice, but there was never anybody there.
Wow.
There's been instant after instant after instance of these type of stories over the years.
The natives, my grandmother was Cherokee, and the natives would talk about, your ancestors coming to you and like in your time of need and talking you through bad situations. And when people talk about, I heard a voice and it led me out of the woods, or a stranger came to me and showed me how to get out of the woods. And then when I looked, he disappeared. And it makes me wonder if it's their ancestors. Like, he's a stranger because you don't know him, because he was your, 15th great grandfather, but he came to your rescue because you're an ancestor. He's your ancestor.
There's lots of stories like that out on the internet.
Yeah.
Ancestors or somebody from another dimension, or your
Spirit
spirit guide,
guide.
angels, whatever you want to call it. It's just amazing, these stories. And there's so many out there. And I mean, if they're true, well, true or not, they're fascinating. I mean, I want to be telling the truth when we speak on our podcast, but these are just stories. We don't know if these stories are true, except the ones that we have something to do firsthand. Jessica's story and Charles's and ours. We don't know, but fascinating all at the same time.
It is fascinating. It's like, that picture of that woman. It's floated around the internet for years now. Shows the woman. The picture dates back mid to late 1800s. There was a photograph of her walking down the sidewalk, and it appeared she was talking on a cell phone. She had holding something up, like this.
Right. Lady B says, yes, these phenomenon are true. She said she's experienced herself. What did you experience? What happened?
Yes,
I mean,
I'd
if it's
love to
something you
hear
can
it.
talk about, let me know. I'd like to hear it.
While she's still answering that you were talking about the cell phone, there are people that believe that is proof of time travel. Like they believe there are people that are allowed to time travel. And I guess they're like the time police or whatever. Maybe they're trying to fix the problems we're experiencing here. And that's why they're showing up with, their cell phones in 1939 in a still image.
Right.
Yes.
Michael and one of his friends actually did some research on that one time. I don't know what the outcome was of it. Did you know what kind of evidence that you got that it was true or not? But I'm sure it was fascinating.
Well, time travel is one theory out there.
We're talking astral travel.
Oh, I don't know about astral travel.
I do know an evangelist, and maybe we'll have to have you on the show one week, lady. I do know of an evangelist who is a friend of ours. He was one to travel to different countries, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, Jamaica a few times, just, a missionary, just wanted to go out and reach the world. Well, he got a call from one of his contacts in Jamaica. Did you make it home okay, Bishop? And he's like, I haven't left home. Oh, yes. We enjoyed your revival last week. It was amazing. It really was amazing. And he was like, I wasn't there. Oh, yes, you were, Bishop. You were there. Each night you brought tremendous message. And he's like, I wasn't there. And then somebody else called him and said, yes, Bishop, you were there. You were there. He was like, no, I was in the bed asleep. So, he's always entertained the thought that maybe, a higher power, took him there through astral travel and had him preach sermons for a full week to a congregation of people.
Or a doppelganger.
I was thinking doppelganger.
Well, sure enough, they all swear he was there. Several people contacted him, like, yes, you were there. Why are you saying you were not there? And he knew that, his home was in Florida and he had not left Florida, not even the city he lived in, much less fly to Jamaica and be there with those people. So that's a story he told a lot. And it was verified by some people. So I know for a fact that story is true. Absolute truth.
Well, from a religious standpoint, the Lord puts you where he needs you, right?
Right. And then Charles says, talking about the Lost Village, the Bermuda Triangle, the Alaska Triangle, what the world is going on here. I know they have found some wreckage, in the bottom of the ocean, a plane or two maybe that's went missing, a boat, but there's so many planes that have went missing they have not found. Boats in the Bermuda Triangle. I was absolutely fascinated with that. Any show that would come on a few years ago, I was right in front of the TV watching it.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated with that. So are these people just missing? Or are they still flying on a plane somewhere in another dimension? What if they landed like somewhere, Hartsfield, Atlanta, and this plane is full of passengers and they get off sort of like the movie I was talking about, the TV show earlier?
Oh, yeah.
What was the name of it? I can't remember now.
It escapes me right this
But
second.
what if they landed and came back all of a sudden? That would be...
I've always been interested in the Bermuda Triangle and the stories that go along with it, though.
And I believe they did find a ship, old rusted out ship one time at sea. And it was a ship that had went missing like in the 40s or 50s. And it was a ghost ship then. And, people out on the waters, if you find an abandoned boat like that, you can stake claim on it and it's yours. They usually sell them for salvage or stuff. So.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, the Bermuda Triangle was like this big topic. It seems like in the 80s, there was a lot of stuff on TV about the Bermuda Triangle, and I don't know why. And it's not nearly as concerning as I thought it was to be when I was a kid, because I was pretty sure that I was just going to get lost in the Bermuda Triangle and nobody was ever going to see me again, but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
so it's weird.
Bahamas, I was like, now wait a minute. Are we going to fly over the triangle? I don't want to fly over it. And so I was assured it went around. Charles was talking about the phone that was seen in an old movie, and another one, a man was seen in a pair of sunglasses and a printed T-shirt. What is that? The Mandela effect? What do you call that?
Yeah, I think it is the Mandela effect.
I'm not sure about that, but old pictures have actually, it looked like somebody's holding an iPhone talking on it before cell phones were even invented. Like real telephones in your home were just coming out back then. Nobody had a cell phone. And then the sunglasses, printed T-shirt. I've seen those pictures.
There's several things.
It's always really interesting.
There's several things like that's traveling all over the internet right now. Just like that picture of the lady that they claim's holding a cell phone up. That's gone everywhere. That's gone viral.
It's always been interesting to me is all the reports of Men in Black. I know that's like an alien thing, but it's worldwide. Like you can go online and you can find all these reports, like even in like Japan, Korea, Asia, other parts of Asia, Europe. There's people talking about seeing the Men in Black. And so it's like, okay. So sometimes you wonder if it's like a pop culture thing, and then you look online and it's all over the world, and you're like, well, how in the world do stories like that spread across cultures like that, especially before the invention of the internet? Like the internet has definitely made the world a smaller place and given us better ways to communicate with each other.
And but before that, like the Ben Hansen was on a series on TV. He was exploring UFO sightings and crashes and stuff. And then the other TV shows about this, they always talk about the men in suits that showed up. So what's up with this? Are they government, or are they aliens themselves trying to clean up after themselves?
That's a good question.
Well,
I've never had an experience with UFOs. I've never seen one that I know of, and I've never had any experiences with any being that could have been from said aircraft from a different galaxy or anything. But I am fascinated, and I do know someone that actually saw a UFO once, and this was a man who wasn't too prone to telling lies. He said he's traveling down an old road, and he's trying to get home. And he said he looked up in the sky, and there was something hovering over his car, truck, following him. And he said it was about as big as a water tower. And he said it made a funny noise. And he said it followed him for a long time. And he said finally he just hit the gas and made a few turns and, it was over. But he says he never knew what that was. He said it was round and about the size of a water tower. The thing that actually holds the water at the top of a tower.
But I think, we've got two different situations here with the stories of the children, and then you got people, talking about a close encounter with aliens. The time lapses, both types of stories are describing time lapses.
Right, and not only that, another dimension.
Yeah.
Because what if they're not aliens after all, and they're just coming from another dimension? Maybe there's not life on another planet out there. Maybe there is. I don't know. I sure like to find out.
Maybe there's more life here than we realize.
Exactly.
They find new species all the time. So there's a lot of things out there deep in the woods. If you go hiking through the thickest parts of the woods in Appalachia, you may eventually discover something that nobody's yet discovered. It's possible.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is the source of energy for Bigfoot hunting, because people go, well, he could be out there and nobody's just discovered him yet.
Right. Well, my theory on Bigfoot goes a little like this, so if there are alien aircraft that's landed in a particular area and they don't want to be found, and what if Bigfoot is like their watchdog to chase people away? Like, we put a fence in our yard, we put our little barking dogs in the fence, somebody comes up, what do the dogs do? They chase them off, they bark at them, they growl, they scare them, and sooner or later they'll leave. They're not coming in the fence to knock on your door because they're afraid the dog's going to bite them. Same way with Bigfoot. Not too many stories have I heard where he's aggressive and he's actually tried to kill somebody. So, it seems like to me all the stories about Bigfoot that I hear is more or less he's throwing rocks at people. He's trying to run them off, just get away from here, leave us alone. What if that's like the aliens' watchdog? Just trying to keep them from finding things that they shouldn't find.
There was a guy in Michigan a few years back, it might have been like 2010 or so, who called the police and reported that he had a Bigfoot in his yard and that it was shape-shifting and stealing his pizza. Now,
Lord.
could they shapeshift? Maybe. And that may also be the reason why we never see him. Like, what if he can shapeshift and he just shapeshifts into a freaking tree when we're approaching?
Oh, wow.
I would question the pizza part, though. I mean,
the pizza part was
Bigfoot
questionable. He had to be really big.
So I see them eating pizza.
I think,
they love nachos.
That must have been really good pizza.
Charles wants to know, why do we think the government is now talking about UFOs?
I
have a theory.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, have you ever watched Star Trek?
Yeah,
yes.
Live Long and Prosper. Okay. So,
that's
when
not
they
Star Trek,
meet,
that's Mork and Mindy.
No, this is Live Long and Prosper. This is
okay. More, you go, no.
So this is the original series. But if you watch any of the Star Trek series, you see where when they make contact with a planet, or they land on a planet where the people aren't really that advanced, they try not to make contact with them because they're not ready, or they're not capable of understanding that there's life beyond their skies. So it would mess up like the trajectory of the planet for them to interfere. I think that our government has been kind of keeping the UFO things quiet until society developed to the point where we could handle the news. It's kind of like talking to your kid about death. You explain it to your little 2-year-old child, Grandpa went to be with Jesus. You explain it to them when they're 16. You're like, well, Grandpa had cancer and he passed away. The conversation changes as the maturity develops.
Right.
And I kind of wonder if we've just not been like as a society capable of handling that news until recently our government decided, all right, so they're not going to let it go, and I think they're ready to just handle the truth. They're pretty desensitized because all the stuff we've been putting out in the media, like movies and video games, and it's time. It won't scare them too bad. Because think if they'd have told us, in the 80s, if they'd have released all this UFO stuff when I was a kid, people would have lost their minds. And if you think back to, what was it called, War of the Worlds, it was a fictional radio show that was broadcast, and people thought it was really happening.
Yeah.
And they went into mass panic.
Well, but before we, I have to get off here. I do want to, I think that maybe I've told you about this, Jessica. A lot of times when I'm leaving home and I'm going to work or coming home, I get behind, what do you call Hummers?
Mm-hmm.
They're military, hauling tanks. Seriously, there's no place between here and where I work. There's no military base. There is no base anywhere in our area. These vehicles turn out a road that turns into a dirt road. We've actually investigated a cemetery out this road. Mm-hmm. There's nothing but dirt roads in that area. I have seen them turn in that area. We have seen tractor-trailer trucks go by our home with military standing on the back with the military jeeps in these vehicles. Every once in a while at night at a certain time, we can hear a very loud chopper go over our house around 10-ish, 10 o'clock at night. About 3 times a week this happens. You can hear it loud. You can tell it's a very large helicopter.
Well, we're talking a Chinook.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Something huge like that. Yeah. So, my thing is, where are they going? Why are they in our area?
Yeah, I can't fathom any reason why a Chinook would be flying in this area.
The road I see them turn off on.
That wouldn't be.
It's a dirt road. There's nothing out there.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be National Guard training, would it? I mean, they do go out and train the National Guard occasionally, but I don't know that they use
not a National Guard
Chinook.
armory. There's no National Guard in this area. You can be in the National Guard, but you have to travel over by Atlanta to go to a drill.
I thought there was an armory in Douglasville.
No, there's
may be. I don't know. I don't know, but I know between my house and my route to go to work, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's an old country road. And this has been going on. I've been noticing it for 2.5 years.
Yeah. Now, I do know there's Air National Guard in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that's what it would have to be, in my opinion, for a Chinook or a Huey or anything like that.
For sure.
Yeah. Because, Chinooks are very large helicopters. They're mainly to transport troops or heavy equipment.
So my thing is there's so much being hid from us, so many secrets. And like you said, maybe the government feels like we're not ready to comprehend, what is out there and what's around us. But anyway, it has been a fun hour, and we're going to bow out here. And thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us yet once again. And Kobe is having internet problems, but he doesn't have. Kobe lives just on the other side of this wall, and he is actually kind of tapped into the internet here in this building. So sometimes it just kicks him off, and that's what happens. So,
yeah.
But maybe we'll have him next week. We'll get him fixed up. We'll get him a new Ethernet cable or something and run out there. Maybe it's the cable. I don't know, but we'll get him up and running again. So thank you, Charles. It's always good to have you talk and join in on our chats.
Lady B.
Thank you, Lady B, for stopping in. It was great to have you.
The new Deep South Paracomic-Con is the first weekend in October. I hope to see you again there. You're going to have to stop in and see me. And we'll definitely get Lady B on the show if we can. Yes, I'd love to. Yes. I'd absolutely love it. it would be sometime in April. But yeah, I'd love to have her.
Yeah.
I've watched some of her videos when she's out in places, and I just sat and watched. I'm like, wow, I wish I could go out places like that.
Very interesting person. It'll be,
there's just something about her. I was intrigued with her the first time I met her. She is something else. All right. Well, Jessica, till next week, or I'll talk to you before next week, I'm sure. But everybody watching, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Till then, peace and love.
Good night, everybody.